I am not really a teacher. A teacher sometimes implies that you should know more than the students, and when I look at the people around, that's not me. Instead, let's say that I am a facilitator of thought and discussion. And specifically around today's topic from a Christian perspective, and today's topic is going to be, I don't fit in your idea of church or your Christianity box. I am just a square peg in a round hole. I'm going to presume that most of us have felt that at some point, or had this dilemma in some point in our life that we worked through, or at least we have pondered the statement. And some of us are more square-pegged than others, and that's okay. When I look around our church family, and it's really cool when you're a service leader, you can see it, or if you watch when people go up for communion, we have a definite, unique group of individuals. Significant diversity in upbringing, in life experiences, in church traditions, and all that is great. We have people come in and here from all parts of the world, really, and they call this church home, and that is good. So I have had several round peg in a square hole moments, both within a church setting and in my life's journey. And back in high school, grade 1 to 8, most of us from Snowflake were in Snowflake School, which was awesome. Grade 9, we moved to Thomas Greenaway in Crystal City. I was a real eye-opener and not good because, well, there was a lot of times that the kids that went to church got beat up because they were church kids. Didn't understand that because that didn't happen at Snowflake, but it happened at Thomas Greenaway, and it was significant. So it was significant enough that I also went to MCI in Gretna for grade 10 and 11. I did not fit in with the jocks there. I played some hockey and some baseball, but I didn't participate in all the sports. I was not the goody two-shoes Christian life kid either. I kind of did my thing, but wasn't into it a whole lot. Definitely wasn't a brainiac. There was kids that were like 80s and 90s all day long. I was a motorcycle outdoors hunting guy. And there was no room in that Christian school box for a guy like that. I tried. Actually, I even convinced one of the smart guys to be my roommate in grade 12, thinking that maybe transitive property would take in effect and I would learn something and do better. Doesn't work that way. The guy that, at that time, the staff had me in a box of a 65 to 75% student. And my roommate, who now owns and operates his own engineering company, was a 95 to 100% student all day long. So what we did was I wrote an English paper, and he wrote an English paper, and I handed in his English paper with my name on it, and he handed in my English paper with his name on it. His paper with my name on it was marked in the 60s. My paper with his name on it was marked in the high 80s. So, with that information in mind, I quit trying. A mistake that I made, and one of those don't do what I do as I say scenarios. And in grade 12, I didn't need many credits to pass, and I passed with the bare minimum, and I just quit. I had enough. Just nuts. Failed 2 courses. I managed to hide it from our kids until Morgan found my report card one day. and there was a reckoning. Well, it's a story of not fitting in, a square peg in a round hole. Maybe some of you have somewhat of the same experiences. I'm not sure. But today we're going to go down at least 4 roads on this topic. Like I said before, it's been a long time since I taught Sunday school. Probably 20 years ago I taught an adult Sunday school. And prior to that, I taught some unruly grade 6 boys Sunday school. Sheldon might know a thing or two about that. Because, yeah, it's been a long time. So I'm not sure how long this is going to last. We're going to need some discussion. I know we're a lot of people are missing today, but we're going to go ahead and see what we got on this topic. So first road we want to venture down would be, have you had someone who is a non-believer say to you, I don't fit into your idea of church or your Christianity box. I am just a square peg in a round hole. Would anybody like to admit they've had a conversation like that with somebody? You don't need to give details or anything like that. Have you had There's a couple. Yeah, a couple people nodding their head. So how did you react? That part you can share if you want, or not. It's going to be really short Sunday school. Awesome. During last Sunday school, Dave talked a bit about being prepared, and we talked about holding firm to the truth, and we talked about speaking in love and compassion, and how do we incorporate our holding firm to truth and having compassion in our response. Also found it interesting that Dave used the story of Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the well last Sunday. And that was a story that I had used as a biblical example, and I had written down the week prior. So there are several ways in the conversation between Jesus and the woman at the well that fit into our topic. And I'm going to read John 4, and this is where it talks about it. And because I'm not a great teacher, I need a little bit of assistance to show that I am know what I'm doing. So I have 2 Bibles, because that makes me feel good. But I'm going to read it out of the NIV Bible. John 4, 1-26. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. The 6th hour is actually kind of significant because at that time a Samaritan woman came to draw water. And why would the Samaritan woman come at the 6th hour? And from what I gather, it's because she was kind of ostracized from the other people in her community. And at the 6th hour was not when the other women of the community typically would go draw water. Starting to see a bit of a round peg in a square hole. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. When the Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Some of the Jews at that time thought the Samaritans were unclean, and they avoided traveling in Samaria. Samaritans were partly Jewish and partly Gentile, and they were disdained by both the Jews and the Gentiles at that time. And tensions often ran high between the Jews and the Samaritans. More square peg. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. How can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as also did his sons and his flocks and herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and will have to keep coming here to draw water." And he told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. And Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. In fact is, you have had 5, and the man you are currently with is not your husband. What you have said is quite true." We're adding more to the round pegged square holeness of this conversation. "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews claim the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus declares, "Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. For you Samaritans worship what you know, and we worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and that time is come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know the Messiah is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, I who you speak to am he." A good story of a conversation between Jesus and a woman, not controversial, but not a common conversation that people would have. So, what are the results or the responses from John chapter 4? An honest, non-confrontational conversation that had the woman going back to her people and telling of the conversation and to the people, and the people responded by coming to hear about Jesus. An interesting way where just a normal conversation of an awkward scenario brought some really cool results. We had a few people say, "Yeah, we've had those conversations." Has anyone had a conversation with someone like this that has brought interesting results that have furthered the kingdom of the Lord? Or maybe, you got one? You want to tell us about it, or you just got one?
I'll try to make this short. A few years ago, I was on Facebook in a group with Christians and Muslims, and they had a few conversations. There was one lady from Guyana, which is one of the 2 Muslim countries in South America, and she was a professing Muslim, and she says, "I love Jesus and I love Islam," and she said she was practicing both. And so I got in a conversation with her about that, and she had a picture of Jesus hanging on the cross, and I said to her, like, this is interesting because Islam is the one world religion where they deny that Jesus died on the cross. Like, how do you have that? And there was a few things that I had learned at that time about Islam, and so I shared with her the things that I heard about, and she wasn't convinced of me saying that. So what she did is she went to the news channels. She called the news channels and she called the radio stations of the country, and asked them if it was true what I was telling her, and they affirmed. They're like, "Yeah, this is true." And so she renounced Islam. She gave her heart to Jesus, and now she was a very poor lady. And she's actually basically living in a small house, but she is going on the streets and she's preaching the gospel to homeless children, to people around her, and there's just immense miracles that are happening. And this just happened through a conversation that I had with her, sharing the truth of Christianity.
Thanks. That's a cool story. Anyone else have some thoughts on talking to non-believers who might question whether they're a square peg in a round hole or what the scenario is? Dakota, you want to talk in here?
We were doing street evangelism in Central Park a few months ago and met a guy and was talking about the Lord, and he was like, yeah, God's great, and he gave me weed. And I was like, what? And we had this whole conversation about how the Lord provided him with drugs. And it really was interesting, but then we told him about like the love of God, and like we got to pray for him, and he like definitely had an encounter and like was crying and was like, yes, Jesus, like I want that and I want to choose that, but like I want to do both. And we're like, yeah, but like the Lord wants to be like, because he was using it as like peace and like rest, and he's like the Lord wants to be that for you. And he was like, yeah, but like I just don't fit in, and this is just how I am. We're like, that's okay, but we just also like the love of the Lord. And so he definitely had like I want to fit, I want to like do this, but like I could never actually be like good enough. And we were just like, it's not about being good enough, it's about receiving the love of Jesus. And he definitely did to an extent, and I have no idea where that went, but it was like interesting that we were just like, you just have to receive the love of Jesus and you don't have to be anything. And he just like had this idea so solidified in his head that he had to be perfect and like to move on from it. Anyway, there you go.
Thanks, Dakota. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Second little trail you want to go down. Has a believer in Christ ever said to you, I don't fit into your idea of church or your idea of Christianity? I am just a round peg in a square hole. I come to church, but I don't feel I fit in. Maybe someone brought it up in a conversation at having coffee with them, or at Sunday, or during a visit. Totally different thought process when a fellow believer says that versus a non-believer. What would some reasons or thoughts be behind a statement like that from a believer? Could be a lot. I don't feel hospitality from others. I got some church hurt. People were mean to me. Maybe there's some spiritual warfare going on, and there's attack from the devil because the devil doesn't want that person following the Lord. Or maybe there's some refining and testing going on from the Lord. Well, there's a concept. How do you distinguish between what is spiritual warfare and what is the Lord refining you? Life has been hard, and that person is simply worn out and broken. I think we all know people like that, and maybe we are that person. They might not even want to get out of that pit because it's a place of being familiar, and other people take care of me there, and I like it. I have a story of coaching hockey. I coached Wyatt's age group for a few years, and there was one kid who was always in trouble. He was a piece of work. And it didn't matter if it was at school or at home or anywhere. He was just out there. He was not coachable. You tell him to go stand there, he would go stand there. You tell him, like, no. So one day I asked him, what's your deal, man? Why are you always like this? In the way that Rob would do that. And this response from this kid, I think he was maybe 9 at the time, maybe 8. His response was, because I only get noticed or receive any attention when I'm a jerk and I act bad. Blew my mind. Do we have that within our group of believers? It's like, this person is not being seen. This person hasn't been valued. And it's easier to say, I don't fit, because it takes away some of that pain. Maybe we lack confidence. I don't know enough about the Bible. I don't know enough about the Lord, and it's just easier to say, you know what, I'm not going to try because it's too difficult to learn, and we just lack that confidence. Or maybe the round hole needs adjusting. I'm fine. Christianity needs to be tweaked a little bit so it fits with me. Those are just a few of the ideas that I came up with. And there's probably others as well, other ideas. But now we're getting a little closer to home. This is a little more in depth. This is a little more, I need to be vulnerable, or I need to be open to be vulnerable, or I need to have someone feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with me. Anybody have some thoughts or ideas? It's really, really quiet out there. It's like, I know there's not many, but. It's going to be a short Sunday school. Good thing that Walt's making lots of coffee. Very good point. What Sheldon was saying for the online and not is, have we as a church created a culture of this is where you need to fit in? And if we have, is that correct, or how do we need to adjust so that people feel comfortable and safe? So the Coles Adults version, without compromising truth, exactly. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Number 3. Have you ever said to another believer, I don't fit into the idea of your church or your Christianity box because I am just a square peg in a round hole? Now it's getting close to home, because now it's like, I don't fit in. Why would I make that statement to someone? Lack of confidence again. Lack of confidence in God. Maybe lack of confidence in myself. How do you get confidence in the Lord? How do you get confidence in yourself? It's kind of like telling a person who doesn't sleep well that they need to get more sleep and better sleep. Coda's laughing at me. I said, yeah, I know that. How do I do that? You just don't say to your body, okay, sleep more, and it works. I've tried it, doesn't work. Or someone who's dealing with depression. You just need to not be depressed. Yeah, I know. It doesn't work that way. How do we gain confidence in God or in yourself? Maybe you're beating yourself up and you go, I don't understand enough about God and I need to study more. And that may be true. But this idea of faith because of guilt doesn't really fly either. I'm not sure on that one. There's probably a lot of different reasons or excuses why I didn't go ice fishing as much as I would like this winter. I have lots of excuses, lots. Not lack of confidence, but I just didn't. I have lots of reasons. Ruth might have some insight into this. And I got my new Bible, and I don't know what it is with the new Bible. Yep. When you were younger, did you ever play Bible golf? You're sitting in the church, and the preacher says, hey, turn to Psalms, and you have your Bible closed, and you open up and see how many times or flips of the page it would take you to get to Psalms. And Psalms is like a par 3, and Ruth is like a par 5 because it's kind of a small book and hard to find. But then you get pretty good with your regular Bible. Like you can start getting a birdie or two. But you get this new Bible, and I got a new Bible. It's a Systematic Theology Study Bible. It's really cool, but they move things around. So my Bible golf game has gone from like, mostly pars and birdies to like double bogeys. So Ruth, we're going to go to Ruth. This is just a little side there. Ruth. One of the cool things about reading the Bible and different books of the Bible is there are a lot of times multiple themes and lessons from the same book. Ruth is kind of like that. And we're going to look at the first chapter of Ruth through the lens of a round peg in a square hole. I'm going to read first part of Ruth, and or maybe I'll paraphrase it. Now I'll read it. In the day when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and the man of Bethlehem in Judea went to sojourn in the country of Moab, and his wife and his 2 sons. The names of the man was Elimelech, and his name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrates from Bethlehem. Ephrodites? Why didn't they have normal names like Rob in the Bible? They went into the country of Moab and remained there. So they went up and around and back down and into a different country. Kind of like coming from Namibia to Snowflake. It's a ways away, isn't it? They sojourned. And while they were there, the boys took Moab wives, and the name of one of them was Orpah, and the other name was Ruth. And they lived there for about 10 years. And both the boys died and the father died, so that the women were left without their 2 sons and their husband. Now I'm paraphrasing. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return to the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." And she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But no, Naomi insisted. "Turn back, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old and have a husband. If I should stay, I have hope. Even if I should give a husband at this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter for me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." And they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Don't urge me to leave you or return from following you." And here's where the real cool part of Ruth is. It says, "For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more, if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth was definitely a round peg. Different race, different religious traditions, different country. And what does Ruth do? Ruth makes a decision. Where you go, I will go. Where your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And she made this decision knowing her mother-in-law was a tad crusty and a little bit of a bitter woman. Made a decision. There's any thoughts on that? James is laughing. James is laughing. He's looking at his mother-in-law. We actually have a lot of examples of women like Ruth within our congregation. And James is looking at Kimberly, and Kimberly's a little bit one of them. Not that her mother-in-law is crusty or bitter, but Kimberly moved from Saskatchewan to Manitoba, married a farmer, which she vowed she would never do, left her family behind, left the Saskatchewan culture behind, came to Snowflake, Manitoba, and rebuilt friendships, rebuilt a life, has an absolutely astounding relationship with my mom. I often joke, like, if there had to be a decision made between Kimberly and me, with my mother, I would be packing my bags. And we joke about it. But that's one example. And looking around in our congregation, there's a lot of women that have made that decision, kind of like Ruth, that your people will be my people. It's pretty cool. And I can only imagine that coming to our communities, for those women were feeling a lot of round peg in a square hole for a while. Any other thoughts on that, or any comments? Number 4 in our pathway, or our little rabbit trails. I have told someone they don't fit into my idea of church, or my idea, or my Christian box, because you are just a round peg in a square hole. Have you ever said that to someone? I sat on number 4 for a while, not sure if I should go there. It seems like it could be viewed as very judgmental. Rob, you're judging us. But if we don't talk about it, but if we do talk about it, and it could require some deep soul searching. So I sat on it for about 4 days. And I didn't get that. Every once in a while, I don't know if you get it, but I get an anxiety punch in the gut from the Holy Spirit sometimes when I'm supposed to shut up. Anybody ever had one of those? Dakota's smiling. I didn't get one, so here we go. Still not there. There are times when we can have good intentions towards people, and yet our attitudes and actions say something else. We can make that statement, you don't fit, without actually using words. I've done it. I'm going to tell you a story about the old Rob who worked in a paper bag factory my first 2 winters out of high school. Yep, I made paper bags. Safeway bags, McDonald's takeout bags. It was a good paying job with no brains required, and it showed, especially with the evening crew. And the guys that were on permanent evening shift, because those guys would typically go out to their vehicles for their half-hour lunch break around supper time, 6 o'clock. And lunch break would consist of drinking beer and smoking pot. And lots of it. At one point during the winter, one of those guys started talking about the Bible while we were working and at just our short breaks when they didn't have time to go for beer. And slowly more and more of those guys engaged in conversations about the Bible. At that time, I wasn't really living for the Lord. I kind of knew where things were in the Bible, and I had a basic idea of theology, but I definitely wasn't living it. And on one occasion, there was a conversation about a story, and I don't remember which story in the Bible it was. And I spoke up and I explained what it meant and where to find it in the Bible. He looked at me, they were kind of shocked. And after that, one of the guys would ask me somewhat frequently about, what do you think about this, or what about that? And I would reply. And one day he said to me, he says, you know quite a bit about the Bible. Why don't you show it more? I just shrugged it off. Kind of changed the subject. Truth is, I was a young, naive kid, not following the Lord, and I didn't think these guys were savable or that the Lord could love them. Man, I wish the Rob of today could go back and have that conversation again. It would be completely different. So maybe you have had that thought towards someone else without getting to know the person. What has their past been like? Are we allowing people to actually change from their past? I knew so-and-so when they were younger, and now, have we allowed them to change? Is our perception of them correct? I have an idea of what Alex is like, but maybe I don't know. Or are you putting up roadblocks for people to get to Jesus, or are you taking them down? Maybe we entertain that thought because we have been diligent believers all our lives, and now I am supposed to love someone who is not. Good example of this is Jonah. And Jonah chapter 4 specifically. Jonah is over by there. Not even in the Jonah chapter 4. And not the part where Jonah didn't go to Nineveh, and not the part where he was in the fish for 3 days, and not the part where he actually did go to Nineveh, but chapter 4. This is something we don't necessarily spend a lot of time on. But let's look at chapter 4 in the context of, I don't think you fit in the box. First of all, the last part of chapter 3. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." The Lord replied, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down on a place east of the city, and there he made himself a shelter and sat in the shade and waited to see what would happen to the city. The story goes on, and the Lord sends a little vine to shade him, and then he sends a worm to kill the vine, and Jonah's even more upset. And then the Lord says to him, why are you upset? Why wouldn't I have, I'll read it here. The sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head, so he grew faint, and he wanted to die, and he said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you have a right to be angry about the vine?" "I do," he said. "I am angry enough to die." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or to make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh was 120,000 people who could not tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" Pretty strong lesson in self-centeredness of Jonah and hypocrisy. A lesson in how to be compassionate. I'm not here to judge anyone about what their attitudes are or what they feel like. And that's up to you whether this strikes a chord with you or not. If it does, my only recommendation is don't hang out near any large bodies of water. And you and the Lord are going to have to figure this all out. I'm going to have to hurry up. Good thing you're not talking, because this is going longer than I thought. So in conclusion, there are several ways we can be a round peg in a square hole. And there is a ton of examples in the Bible who were round pegs in square holes. And we've touched on a few of them, and there could be more, like Daniel in the lion's den, Joseph in the middle of a crooked Egyptian court, John the Baptist, Paul, and more. So if you identify with, I use that term with a little bit of grain of salt, but if you identify with any of these square peg in a round hole examples we talked about, welcome to the club. You are not alone. You are seen and have value. Don't let others define or their perception of you define you. God can and will use your round-peggedness. He's done it before. And for his benefit and his glory, he created you. And remember, if you're a round peg in a square hole, you are unique, just like everyone else. Any thoughts or comments? I know we got to close pretty quick. Any thoughts or comments on round peg in a square hole? Nothing? All right, let's pray to close. Lord, thank you that we can be a round peg in a square hole. Thank you that we can make adjustments where we need to. And thank you that you use our round pegginess to further your kingdom. And just pray that today's Sunday school will strike some thought and some conversations that can further our relationship with you. And pray